Hello, so I think we're on. So to our audience who are or who have joined us already, and the audience who will join us, a big welcome to the seventh session of the combined media summit to 2020 that has been launched by the National Newspaper Olympiad. So this is the first of its kind type of event that has been launched by Labi and his team at the Newspaper Olympiad. And the purpose of this event has been to bring together personalities from the media, social entrepreneurs, journalists, editors, and everyone who has some sort of interest and stake in the media sector to come and discuss topics that are of relevance to both the sector and to young people who have already been connected to the sector as well. Today, for the session, we have two fantastic guests, and I won't go ahead and introduce them in detail. I'll allow them to do that. But with us, we have, of course, Salim Samad Sir, who a lot of you would know, a renowned journalist and a social entrepreneur from Bangladesh. He first joined our network in Ashoka in the 1990s. I think it was 1990. So he's very much a veteran of the social entrepreneurship ecosystem and sector, and he's been with us a very long time. And from India, we have, and from India in Bangalore, we have Meera K, who is the founder and director of Urbani Foundation, as well as Citizen Matters. And she does some fantastic work around engaging citizens in civic participation and civic action through the use of data and through the use of media as well. But I'll allow our speakers to introduce themselves in a minute. But before we do, I quickly wanted to speak a bit about the organization that I represent, Ashoka. So Ashoka is the world's largest network of social entrepreneurs globally. For the last 40 years, Ashoka has been finding very, very powerful individuals who have very, very powerful ideas and who are addressing very complex societal problems through these ideas. And with us today, we have two fellows who come from many different time frames. So Salim Sir, as I mentioned, was elected as an Ashoka Fellow in 1990. Meera was elected as an Ashoka Fellow a couple of years ago, I think in 2016 or 17. So elected at very different times, but they both share the same identity in that they are addressing very big problems. And in this case, they are both very, very much connected to the media sector as well. So we have roughly about 40 minutes or so today to convene this conversation. And in this conversation today, we really wanted to focus on the role that social entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurship can play in the media sector, not just in Bangladesh, but also globally as well. And what I would encourage our audience to do is on the chat box through the media that you are watching this, please leave your comments, your questions, and any thoughts and reflections that you might have. And if we do have time, we would love to go through any of the questions that you might have. But I won't take much more time. I wanted to go to our guests straight away. And maybe we can start with you, Salim Sir. And how
No,
we
not
would
me.
like. Sorry?
Meera.
Meera?
Meera.
Okay.
Talk about her library.
We'll talk about so since Salim Sir has said we should ask Meera first, and so why don't we do that? What would be great, Meera, is just to hear a bit about yourself. We know that you are joining us from Bangalore in India. It'd be really nice to hear a bit about your story and sort of how you first got connected to the media sector.
Right. Thank you, Shantanu. So I will start with the usual explanation of why, local media, why civic media, which is look at the population of city. So if you look at Bangalore, we are now about 12 million. And when we started, it was roughly around 6 to 7 million. So that's the size of countries. Bombay is like 18 million or something, and Delhi, I don't know what. So these are basically mini countries. Now, Bangalore, I would compare it to, for example, Sweden, right? 12 million is Sweden, and earlier we were a Belgium. So a city is so it's so big, it's so complex, and issues are so nuanced that you need to really have something dedicated to really understand what's going on. So it's not just about having a page or two in the daily papers to look at, oh, this happened, that happened, and not talking about uh, plain reportage, but you need to kind of take a step back and really understand why things are the way they are. Why are the systems broken? Why do roads have potholes? Why is garbage never picked up? Very, very basic stuff that affects our daily lives. These are not complicated foreign policy, national stuff. What did the prime minister say? None of those. But these are things that, what is your local government doing? What are the budgets that they're having? Who's your local councillor? What are they saying, discussing, and what are the plans that they have, and so on. And that is something that never had got too much of attention, right? Most people didn't even know who their local elected representative was, right? Beyond the election, people were not very engaged in local news or local issues. And our media is kind of obsessed with big stuff, right? What's happening at a national level, international level. At the most, you will know what the chief ministers or your state are saying. But what's happening in your neighborhood, not enough people kind of care about that. So that's one of the reason we felt like, unless we have something to really dive deep into this particular topic. And civics is something like, you think of it as some boring stuff that you kind of studied in school, but beyond that, people didn't have this connection. So that's why we felt like you need something dedicated to look at what's going on. And because that's how change can happen, really. Unless you understand things, we really can't figure out how to fix it. So that's how Citizen Matters was born about 12 years ago. And we look at local governance, civic issues, environment, and economy in our cities. Started as a local news magazine for Bangalore, and then we kind of evolved into a media that looks at different cities. So we have local chapters in Bangalore, Chennai, and now Mumbai. But we also do look at other cities. So broadly, we look at urban issues and understand the patterns of development and what's going on, and so on. So that's the whole like story of Citizen Matters. And the key thing we do is we look at it very holistically, right? And we work with uh, not just professional journalists, but we also work with citizens, because people in the neighborhood know what's going on. So some of them would be involved in issues. So we bring them on board and work collaboratively with citizens. So there's regular reportage done by reporters on the ground. There is citizen journalism, and then we also have inputs from experts, practitioners, and so on. So it's a very like sort of hybrid model. And at times we also work together on individual stories may have multiple authors, and everybody working together, looking at data, analyzing stuff, and then presenting those insights. So that's how we look at things. Yeah.
Right, and Mira, from a personal point of view, really hear a bit about your own story that connected you to this sector in the first place. Could you speak about sort of your journey, how you were first connected to the media, and then how you was it something personal that you went through as a citizen of Bangalore that sort of compelled you to start this, or what is the story behind it?
No, I just as a citizen, because I was trying to understand, the challenges of the city. And in 2005, 6, Bangalore was growing in leaps and bounds, and it was just like, the population is literally doubled in the last so many years. So, and it was like it was a city in progress, right? There was always something dug up. There were flyovers half in progress. Nothing was really complete, and there was work going on everywhere, and nobody really knew why we had to daily life was so painful. No, you'd always be stuck in traffic jams, or there'd always be dirty streets, and so on. So that was just starting to ask those questions and trying to understand and realizing that there's really no source of information which will help you explain and provide insight into these issues. So that was the kind of starting point. Yeah. But we went down and met a lot of resident associations, and try to understand their challenges and needs and what they were interested in doing. Because these are like what we call change makers on the ground, right? They are the ones involved in their own neighborhoods and trying to fix stuff. They'd go talk to the official, and and so on. So it looked like this was like a gap that needed to be filled.
Fantastic. One extra question that I had was, before you ventured into a journey as a social entrepreneur, what were you doing? Were you a journalist? What was your role in society before that?
Like many other people in Bangalore, I was in technology. So for about a decade, I was working in the tech space, and this was something I found interesting and kind of seemed to be an important thing to do, and that's how I kind of started looking at the the civic space, and then felt like media would be a good approach to take it, because if you get involved in solving issues, you could maybe look at a neighborhood level, or you look at specific issues at a larger scale, but it wasn't there were just too many problems to solve, right? And it's not scalable for one person or one organization to go and like do that. But this could kind of, hopefully, the idea was that media could get more people involved and engage in making difference.
Fantastic. And at Ashoka, we have a vision as an organization where we believe that in order to address all the problems that we have as society, it's important to organize in a way where everyone is a change maker. And it seems like what you are doing, Meera, is very, very true and aligned to that vision that we also have. And then with that, I wanted to hand it over to you, Salim, sir. I know that you have many stories to tell, and you yourself love telling stories, many times in a humorous way. So I'll hand it over to you, and we'd love to hear about your long journey in the media sector, and what you have done in the past, as well as what you are doing today, because it's been a long journey for you.
Thank you, Shant. First of all, I want to appreciate that you have selected me to talk on this platform. I would definitely, of course, I'm very excited to meet Meera for the first time. I hope, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to listen to her first, and of course, I will continue to listen to her. I don't have much stories, as Shanta said, but Shant, one small advice to you. This is a very serious advice. Don't call me sir. If you call me sir, I'm going to shut down.
Okay.
I'm not a sir. I don't teach. I'm not a government officer. I'm not a police officer. I'm not an officer. I'm Janata. I'm Admi. And so mango people. I mean, to be okay. To be very precise, I in fact had to start journalism. I didn't want to start journalism. I was too young to understand what is journalism. But in 1971, I hope you are aware, we had a brutal war of independence, and India had to come join us, means march into Dhaka to liberate Bangladesh. So in 1971, I was recruited in the guerrilla, in the Mukti Bahini, but I was posted in Dhaka because I can speak English, I can speak and understand Urdu, and of course I know my native language. So that was very important because I was not a spy, but I was in intelligence and logistics. But so one of the major hub that I used to work with is the newspaper office, because at the time there was no much security that you have to ask a chowkidar or somebody, can I enter? So I used to walk into newspaper office because that was very important to get news. And that is where I understood that if you are a journalist, you can walk to any person. I mean, you can go talk to a minister, you can talk to the president, you can talk to a police officer, and you are, maybe you will not be harassed by government officers and the police especially. So since then, I wanted to be a journalist. I said, once this guerrilla warfare, I mean, this war is finished, I will join journalism. And luckily, I was too young, but I just because I can write, especially at that time. Hope Meera will understand. We used to have a typewriter, so there was no machine, nothing. A typewriter, and of course, all the news used to from one city to another city or to the capital Dhaka or anywhere in the world, they used to use teleprinter, and of course we used to use the Toratokka. Toratokka means the dot and dash. I mean, if you want to send a story to your newspaper office. Well, I also did that in, had been lucky to use that Toratokka means dot and dash to send news to my newspaper office. Okay, so that is in fact really inspired me. So once the war was over, so everything was here. We are independent. The Indian Army was already in Dhaka for a couple of months, and I was very lucky. I could join a weekly newspaper. Just they started a new Bangladesh, so they put an advertisement in the newspaper office, and of course I was too young, and I had not graduated from college, so obviously they will not hire me or even as a volunteer. So what I did, there was a section called proofreader. I don't know whether proofreader exists anymore.
Anymore.
So you have to. I mean, it was a totally very archaic. So it is very medieval technology. So you need a proofreader to write the proof, means the mistakes, or even there is a. So I decided to join as a proofreader. It's much easier. You don't. They will not ask me where did you study, because I just came out of high school. So they will not hire me in any case because I was not in the college. Okay, so that's how I started, and in few months, maybe in next 6 months, I was already I was already been given assignment. I was already given responsibility to write. So, and of course, writing at that time is very challenging because just post-war and everything is in shambles. It's a war-ravaged country. The founder, the architect of Bangladesh, has just returned from his captivity in Pakistan. So obviously you can understand that there is nothing is moving. The railway is not moving. The bridges has been blown away. So so the challenges is very different from today. I mean, we don't write about bridges and train is not shuttling or the buses are not moving. Even there is buses, the bus doesn't have a diesel to fuel to run the country because Bangladesh at that time had no money. I mean, they didn't export a single dollar as to buy a fuel or anything. You just name it. You cannot buy anything. There's not a single dollar. So whatever we had been assisted was, of course, India first gave us fuel and many other issues that led the train and the bridges. So a lot of bridges. Okay, so that let me cut it short. So I moved from that weekly, of course. You will understand in all revolution and all war, there is always a counter revolution, or there is always a group which is disgruntled group. I mean, they had joined the war, they were all guerrillas, they had very leadership, but they are disgruntled with the government. So that it happened. And for unfortunately, I I just walked into the other side of the of the thick line. I would rather use the word thick line. I just crossed to the other line, and I joined the group which was opposing the critical of the government, because of course nothing was working. So the textile mill is nothing working. So you don't have clothes to wear. I mean, you just cannot imagine. The electricity is not working because there is no fuel. I mean, at that time it was all run by furnace oil. So if I correctly remember. So our challenges were so very different and stories were very different. And while doing the stories, I found that the more I go to the people, I go more to the community. I find it's very challenging. And I mean, I ran into bad luck. The newspaper that I was working was shut down by the government. The government was, of course, the new Liberation War government had shut it down because it was too critical, and it's an English language newspaper, and of course it was being widely quoted. And I still remember it was also Times of India, Hindustan Times, and even the newspaper in Kolkata was quoting that newspaper. I mean, so obviously they also need to quote because one reporter of Hindustan Times or Times of India or PTI cannot travel all over Bangladesh, and they cannot travel because there is all the bridges were broken. So my newspaper was shut down, and I mean, I wouldn't use the word unemployed. So and of course everything had gone shattered. My dreams shattered. By the time I was back to studies, but again, journalism was always in my mind. So I was very lucky that another weekly newspaper hired me, and then another newspaper hired me, and there is where I formally became a reporter. A reporter, and I was doing all the, how do I explain, nasty stories. How do I say? I was I was not doing normal stories again. So by the time it was 1980 when 19 in 1980, so there was a military government. A military government, in fact, the Mukti Bahini commander, the front-ranking Mukti Bahini commander became the president. But of course, it was all the 71 war, the vision and the tree and the constitution were all shattered because constitution was literally been open hearts. So they did surgery on that constitution. It is no more constitution of the people. So we already, in fact, the newspaper that I was working, that is still still alive. That newspaper editor, he sent me to cover the insurgency, which is already happening with the ethnic community. They are demanding for regional autonomy of the hill forest. So they are mostly Mongoloid. They are from different communities. They were Chakma, Marma, Tripura. They all joined together, and they are from. I mean, most people talk about they are Buddhist, but that's not true. There are Buddhist, Hindus among the ethnic communities, but the primary is the Hindus and the Buddhists in the hill tracts. They are totally different from us. Once they walk in the city, people speak to them in English because they think they're foreigner. They're Japanese or Korean or wherever, or Thai. They look like them. Obviously, people see. And I was sent to cover a genocide. That was the first major break story, covering a genocide by the Bangladesh army, the army which is a legacy of the liberation war. They had committed a similar genocide. I mean, because it is a totally different ethnic group. I mean, you will understand for how did the Pakistan army identified us, because we are totally different. Our physical features, our language, our culture, our food habits are totally different. So it is very easy to identify us. I mean, you don't need to ask questions. I mean, easily by physical feature or even by talking, whether they speak in Urdu or Punjabi or whatever, even in English, you can easily identify. Here again, it's a similar thing that happened in the Chittagong hill tracts, because they are totally ethnic and they are totally different physical features. They are Mongoloid and they have a different language and of course a totally different food habit. So it is very easy to identify them and to easily identify now. And of course, whoever they look at, I can see. I will not compare with any other country or any other troop to other state. But of course, I understand. So whenever they see a Mongoloid or military, they see a Mongoloid, they immediately get very nervous. I would rather use. So they were nervous, and of course, this thing has happened. And I was too tiny a reporter. In 1980, I was really a tiny reporter. I was working in a weekly, which is of course, you understand, you get at least 4 or 5 days to write a story. You have to talk to different people. But here you are literally reporting from a stadium. So you are literally an observer. I mean, in the stadium they're having a cricket match. So you are reporting on the cricket. So my genocide was almost like that. When I talked to my editor, I said, "How do I report? I don't have ABCD of this knowledge of writing." So that literally, when that story was published, of course edited, but whatever I had written, whatever I had said, they had published in totality. I mean, end to end was my story. Of course, I understand grammatical error or whatever has been, because I had to write it very quickly. And then I didn't have to look back, because that story was an English newspaper. Immediately Amnesty picked up in the same evening. BBC Radio picked up the story. So, and I continued to stay in the hill tracts. And of course, again, I was picked up by the military, as it happens with any other country. I was picked up. I was not tortured, to be very frank, but I was, because I was destined to be killed. So they didn't bother to torture me. So they didn't feed me. They didn't give me water for 5 days, because they thought that this guy is going to be killed or his body will be thrown in the lake. There's a big picturesque lake in the Chittagong hill tracts. Okay. So since then, I had not looked back. Rather, when I came back to the capital, I was bargaining with my management about raising my salary, not double, but triple. I said, if you don't pay me triple, so I will not write. I will not stop writing. So that was my journalism. And of course, that newspaper, of course, gave me a lot of opportunities. And without understanding ABCD, I was started writing on environment. I was starting writing about human development. But whatever you talk about today is human development, like women's empowerment. And my first story was very interesting, was on women's empowerment. It was on the Grameen Bank, that Nobel laureate Professor Yunus. I went to him. He was totally obscure person, and he just started as a project. So Grameen Bank was just a project. It was not formally a bank. It was a project under the central bank, funded by the central bank. Of course, so I didn't have any clue, but one of my photographers, he was hired to photograph. He was a press photographer. So I just accompanied him. And once I was there, I was so excited seeing the woman being so vibrant. I've never seen a rural woman so vibrant and so confident. Oh my God, I have never, I've seen the war, I've seen thousands and lakhs of refugees coming back. I have seen a different, and I couldn't believe that this is Bangladesh. Of course, it is only one, few villages in just north of the city. So it was definitely give me a lot of. So when I came back, and again I was talking to my editor said, I have no experience writing on women. A woman's accepting, credit, and they trying to organize themselves, organize their family. I have no idea. You just write whatever you have seen, whatever you have done in the hill tracks, whatever you've done, do whatever you have seen. So I wrote an article, and after, I must tell you, because that's a kind of pride of a reporter. After several years, maybe after 25 years, one American journalist came to interview Professor Yunus, and I was his local, what do I say, chamcha. I'm sorry, that's the right word. Chamcha means local fixer. But I love to use this word chamcha, because I have to say, yes, sir, yes, sir. Oh, you want to interview Professor Yunus? Okay, I think I can connect you. So he was connected, and I had to drive him to Professor Yunus. So Professor Yunus, of course, he was an American journalist working for Wall Street Journal, and he was a regional editor. So obviously they knew each other. They met somewhere. Okay. So after that interview was everything, and then he shook my hand and said, "Excuse me, I didn't get your name." He was asking, Professor Yunus was asking me, and he said, "Sir, I'm an obscure person. I'm presently his chamcha," and I used this word. I'm his chamcha. Of course, that American doesn't know what is chamcha. So that was how I and Professor Yunus said, "Your name should be very familiar." I said, "That's impossible. My name cannot be familiar with you." And he said, I think I know. Okay, give me a minute. And then he looked into so the Grameen Bank, his floor was covered, the walls, the corridor was covered with all newspaper, different newspaper clips of different newspaper, New York Times, Time Magazine, you just name it, in the Indian newspaper, Japanese newspaper, you just name it in the world. So and because he was too famous, so obviously all newspaper covered him very well. And there he located my article. The first article that he was saying, Salim Samad? I said, yes, this is your article. I said, oh my God, my article is here, and I need a copy of this. I don't have any copy. Okay, so that is how. Okay, so I always, then, of course, I was also talking about environment. I didn't join any environment. One thing I always avoided, joining a group, say the environmental group, or joining another group. No, I said I'm a reporter. I'm an independent here. I cannot be I cannot. I don't want to use the word partisan. I don't want to say I don't belong, because once you belong to a group, automatically your writing, your thinking will be. I would not use the word bias, but it will be very different. So that the readers may not get the actually what is they're supposed to read, or what information they want to, because I may hide some information, or I may exaggerate information from the environmental group. So what happens is that's the last part. So with those two knowledge of writing on women, the women's development, the women empowerment, and of course going to the children, the children's education. So I thought that why don't I go to the district, to small town. So with my, I don't have money. With whatever I had, I travel from one on my off days, or I used to ask the editor, can I have a 2 or 3 days off day? Because I used to collapse my off days. Okay, so I went to different district town, and then I was sitting with different press club. So from one press club to another press club, and then I found that other press club is also requesting me, can you please come for a day? I said, yes, if you give me a place to stay and food, meal at least, a modest meal, I'm okay. I can come. So this is how I started to share with the small town reporters how what to write and how to write. That's also very important about environment, development, all the issues that we are talking about today. What Mira has just mentioned, a few things that we were sharing. So, and I was a mentor. I became a mentor. I mean, that was a big challenge for me because it was too much for me. I mean, doing a day-to-day job as a reporter, I'm not from a desk man. And of course, again, this guy is calling me up and said, this is a thing I have found. Is it a story? Will my editor of that newspaper publish? I said, yes, if you write like this, if you have this information, definitely your newspaper. And let me know when you are sending the story. Maybe I can talk to the gatekeeper. Okay. So that is, then Ashoka, I mean, radar found me when I was doing this. And the radar, in fact, got me into this fellowship from Ashoka, and I had no clue about Ashoka, but I uh, knew uh, at least the first few Ashoka fellows. The first fellow, he was doing something very different. So in fact I interviewed that guy and I went to his project area in the villages. So that's how he knows me. And once the newspaper article was published, so he decided, oh, you're doing I mean, giving. I said, no, I don't use the word training. This is a very I would say a very derogatory word, that as if I know everything and you don't know anything, so you have to be trained. So I don't use the word training. I don't use the word training workshop. So it is just a sharing workshop. So this is how I think. Once Ashoka Fellow started, I started. Of course, I had needing more money, and with that I was doing more exercise. This was the first part of getting into Ashoka Fellowship.
Salim, I have some questions for you, but I realize that, I mean, we have 10 minutes or a bit longer to go. So I have the same question for you that I'm going to ask Mira, and I just wanted to bring Mira in very quickly now. And so Mira, I mean, obviously the work that you do is very much focused on activating the power of data and media to drive civic engagement and participation. Could you share with us some stories of actual changes that have happened as a result of citizens in Bangalore and other cities taking part and leveraging the power of these two things?
Okay, let me give you one small example of what could be done.
Salim, so I had asked Mira first.
Sorry. Sorry. Mira, please go ahead.
We can go ahead with listening
no,
to
Mira, please.
Okay. Okay, the two common examples, that you can see in Bangalore are related to lakes and garbage. I'll just use those examples because it's something that you will see in every other city also. For example, about 7 years ago or so, the city was like really grappling with a garbage problem. We still have that issue, but they were literally running out of space in the landfills, right? And the villagers next to landfills were protesting, saying, not in our, keep it in your own backyard, not in our backyard, sort of thing, because everything from the city was taken outside and getting dumped and like polluting the groundwater and affecting the people living there. So then there was all this conversations about, okay, what can we do with the waste? How do we like ensure, wet waste, kitchen waste is composted? How do we ensure like dry waste is recycled? So those conversations started, happening. And some communities, especially like apartments or small neighborhoods, tried creating neighborhood models that could maybe work. So they said, okay, let's start segregating, and let's try, composting the kitchen waste nearby or in house, and then let's try to find vendors who could take the dry waste, and then basically minimize the stuff that has to go into a landfill or be rejected. So, and that whole process was a lot of trial and error, and then finally and there were a lot of failures also. I mean, again, it sounds very, very like, elementary. This is such a boring topic like garbage, but it's a huge issue because we are talking about hundreds of crores being spent in transporting this garbage out of the city. And this is something that affects everybody, especially like, people who are poor, who don't get their garbage cleared. And for us, for the middle class or the upper middle class, you would just like throw it out, and as long as our house is clean and nice, we're fine. So it's a huge issue. And then so these communities came up with a sort of solution. They said, okay, let's have three-way segregation. Let's have the kitchen waste separate, dry waste separate, and reject waste. Not complicated. Earlier they talked about, we need to have e-waste separate, we need to have like plastic separate, glass separate, paper separate. Nothing. Anything that is dry, that can be recycled, goes into the a bag that can be sent to the recyclers. Now then you have two bins, one for the reject waste and the other for the kitchen waste. And so and then they actually started like finding business models that could also work for this. So the vendor had to charge lesser for the kitchen waste, and had to charge more for per kg. They would charge more, 6 rupees for reject waste, which had to be taken to the landfill. But if you had kitchen waste nicely cleanly segregated, because it could easily compost, it's organic matter, they would charge only 2 rupees. So found a model, and then they would pay for the recyclables. So this model actually incentivized people to segregate, right? And they gave like these color coded bins, so it's easy for anybody to actually start. So this whole model got created in like a few in a small neighborhood, and then started slowly going from one apartment to another, from 3 apartments to 12. And then now in the entire city, you have like pretty much every apartment follows this model, right? So this is the power of citizen like involvement. The government tried coming up with like they pushed their own model, which didn't work. It was a failure. But when it came from ground up, it worked so much better. Not just about the process, but also how it fitted into the rest of the system. and and that's how it's called the Bangalore model now. It kind of is scaled up. It's actually, this whole approach is now part of the national municipal solid waste management policy. It's gone to other cities. So it's a very simple thing of how households can manage their waste, right? And similarly, how other organizations or corporate buildings can also, commercial buildings can manage, and so on. So this is a great example of a citizen starting this whole chain of change. And the first article was a citizen piece which says 100 rupees to manage your waste. Okay, that was a title of the article, and actually goes about explaining how an apartment community can kind of adopt this model, because the two bins and that one bag for recycling was cost exactly $100, along with a poster on which goes where. And that started with that citizen piece, and of course we followed up with a lot of things on the background information of about the budgets, about the all the different projects the government was trying to do, the various scams of in garbage contracts, and there was this court case going on to fix this problem, and then we were doing a lot of data, like you're talking about, digging out the data. For example, the municipal authorities submitted a list of vehicles which were transporting garbage, right? They said, oh, we have so many of these vehicles, here is a list. And then we went and dug out, and we found like some of those license numbers were actually two-wheelers, some of them were school buses. I mean, they just completely given a whole bunch of random numbers. So this is how you kind of use data to dig stuff. And later on, now, for example, we put out all the garbage contracts, we put out the list of workers by ward, the whole micro plans they called. All that is online, and people who are active in local communities actually use that data to kind of keep track, saying, hey, where is the garbage truck supposed to come at this time? So yeah, it's putting information out actually has a huge effect in getting more people involved. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite examples. Very simple. It's something that every city can relate to, but this is how change can start.
Amazing, amazing. Such a great example. And Salim sir, you were saying that, I mean, you started very simply by not training, but sharing information with prospective reporters and individuals. Do you have any powerful stories that you can share? Maybe one story of someone who you were able to work with and the transformation that resulted?
Okay. I mean, nothing as exciting as Mira has done, but it's something to do with I was in the committee. I was in the committee to they wanted actually a committee, media committee. Media is there from all I mean, journalists or whoever in the media to be in the subcommittee of the Shishu Odhikar Forum. So you can understand the Child Rights Forum. As the on the same year when the Child Rights Convention was passed by the United Nations, immediately there was a large forum. So all the, so it's like Save the Children, the Bangladeshi UNICEF, and all the Bangladeshi NGOs, they all joined the committee. So there was a discussion. So the media group was also have to give a plan. We are all volunteers, so we gave a plan. And I gave a plan, and that was supported by all the media members who were in the committee. That why don't we have a newsletter written by the children itself? Children. There's nothing to do with the school newsletter. It is something like all the disadvantaged children. I don't want to use any other word. The disadvantaged children. If you say street kids, fine. If you say they are child laborer, fine. I mean, we have nothing to do. That's an NGOs are supposed to take care of them. So we decided that why don't the disadvantaged children, they write and they publish their own newsletter. So the committee, I mean, immediately, of course, you will understand. Immediately, the committee, the board was literally saying, "Are you crazy? Are you the street kid is going to write? You are a journalist, you can write, but how?" I said, "Yes, they can write. If they can speak, if they can tell their stories, they can definitely write. And even if they write without grammar, that doesn't matter. So because when we give an interview or when I am talking to you right now." I mean, I don't bother about grammar. I don't bother about a proper sentence, writing a sentence. I said, why not? Why not we have it an audio or a video in a print form? They said, no, Salim, you take the responsibility. You write for them. You take interviews of the street kids or those child laborers or those who are in the disadvantaged schools. I said, no way. Only one organization, I just literally like this. Can you give me this much of money? Which is very modest money. This money, because I'm not going to charge. We are not going to take money. So they said, how much money you want? I said, this is an average to print and publish that newsletter because others will be taken care of. So we got selected of those disadvantaged children from one from the street kid. And of course, it was 50-50, boys and girls. So, and fascinating articles. Then one of the major newspaper, they accidentally bumped into one of the few newsletter, and they decided to translate into English and then publish in their. It's the largest newspaper called Daily Star. It's the largest English independent newspaper in Bangladesh. So they decided to translate, and so they ran a story about how this article has been developed and how this was collated. And the only thing we should mention in bold letter, in red bold letter, that nothing has been touched by an adult. Adult means we didn't touch anything. This is as it is as they have written. So you have to, of course, you have to excuse it. So this was a big challenge, and we ran it for about 2 years. Then the board, of course, they were not satisfied. They wanted their publicity stories, their organization stories, their cutting tapes, cutting red ribbons stories, gala function stories. That, of course, we said this is not in our editorial policy. So, obviously, they stopped the budget. The first thing is they stopped the allocation of the budget. So it collapsed after 2 years. But still, it is a major, not only an issue, but it is a challenge that yes, it can be done. with the street kids and the disadvantaged children, and even I mean, even we had from different of the children. So this was one. This is one, and by the time, in fact, I was very busy because Ashoka suddenly, without any reason, sent me a big fax. And at that time, there was no email. So it was big fax, several pages, and said, Salim, can you, Ashoka office called me and said, can you fill it up? I filled it up, send it, because I had to give a new idea. I mean, so obviously working with the children, so I gave an idea about how about a rural woman having their own newspaper? I mean, a voice, in fact. It's not a newspaper, more a voice. How about a rural newspaper? So I have seen the rural women who have been empowered. So why don't they talk about themselves? What about they talk about the society? What about they talk about the environment? What about they about the land distribution? Whatever. I mean, so again, and luckily I got a separate funding for that doing that. In fact, action-oriented research, and which ended up that if I can do it I mean, do it very professionally, then I will be admitted in Colorado State University. So I ultimately went to Colorado State University. So I went to 8 places in Bangladesh. So and they were absolutely rural, absolutely rural. They have never seen a town. They never seen a city. They've seen city boy like me, but they've never seen a town. Yes, they've seen a lot of sahibs and mem sahibs coming to their village through that NGO. And so mostly they are working with the and I mean, especially women have been who are being empowered. So and in one village I had a very interesting experience. They decided to have a committee. The rural women decided to have a committee, and the committee is all the committee members. They cannot read and they cannot write. So I cannot say no, you cannot be in the member of the committee. So they when they came up, there was a lot of people murmuring in that meeting. It was all women. They're all sitting in the big hall room, and they were said, I think there is a different dissent, a voice of dissent. I said, can I hear your voice? They said, oh, the woman that they decided to be in the committee, they cannot read and write. I said, that's not a problem. It's very easy. Say, I do go to different countries where I don't speak their language. I cannot even read their newspaper. So I travel, I walk, and I go to different places. So what could be done? I said, okay. So I individually asked, do you have a daughter who is already studying in school? Yes, said yes. Said Salim, Salimta, yes, my daughter is in class 9. Oh, if she's in class 9, then she can write your story. So why didn't you tell your story to your daughter and let her write? So this is how we collected the story from one place. At least there was one problem in one area, and within few months, oh my God, it was such a big, major, I mean, the breakthrough in the community, because they felt they were empowered. They know how to write. They know how to publish, and because everything was done by them. We did not do anything. We did not tell them what to write and how to write. That we did in a different press club. So this was a totally, and I really found the enthusiasm. I could literally read their mind. I mean, when we talk about women, I mean, especially in the South Asia, we always say, women, they are, I mean, you always have a different thought. And I was very, in one, the last thing I want to talk about every group had, 8 groups had different background. Like I worked in the fisherman community. I worked in the Adivashi community. So obviously it was very different. One place was very, very different. So I was in south of Bangladesh called Barisal, that's a village. And in that village, and because I was working for 12 months, and 12 months, I attended the puja, Durga Puja in that village. I attended Christmas in that village. I attended a Muslim Eid on the same village, and the same group of women who had been in my committee. So it is a unique place where there was 1/3 Hindu, 1/3 Christian, and 1/3 Muslim. So, and that was very interesting because they were in the, and of course they were very upset with the local social leader, like the community leaders, like just name it, the mullahs. Even whatever Taslim Nasrin, that feminist writer, mentioned about Bangladesh, rural Bangladesh, the mullahs, I have heard means I have written, articles written by the women in all the places about the mullahs. The mullahs, how they are, uh, disturbing them. Not disturbing what to write, but disturbing that women are getting empowered. This is un-Islamic. So obviously, this is also was a challenge. Nobody wanted to attack me, but the women were under huge pressure. So this is a two major issue that I was able to do. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. So we have run out of time, and I see the organizers in the back end telling me that we need to stop. We need to stop. But I just wanted to give 30 more seconds to both of you, and maybe we can continue with you, Salim sir. So 30 seconds. So obviously, the National Newspaper Olympiad has a very big youth audience across Bangladesh and now globally as well. What message would you have for young people who are looking to engage with the media or are disengaged with the media? What would you want to say to young people if you had one message to convey to them in the world that we're moving into? How can the media shape their lives, and what contribution can they play through using media?
Okay, I don't know what Mira is going to talk about, but I can see.
If you can try to put it in 30 seconds, yes?
Okay, the first thing is, during this coronavirus pandemic, it is very clear that the print media is going to die. The number of patients dying, the newspaper is going to die. So they have to change their content. So that is a big, space, a large space where the young people can come in as a netizen, as a citizen journalist, as Mira has talked about. So there is a scope for this young generation, the young media practitioners who want to be in the media practice as a netizen, as a citizen journalist.
Fantastic. Thank you, Salim sir. Very, very sound advice. And Mira, what would you have to say? You're on mute, Mira.
Yeah. So my first point was actually exactly the same as Salim sir said, which is that everybody has a right to communicate, like all other rights. So if you have, all of us have experiences and stories to share, and so please do that if you think that's going to make a difference to somebody else, whether or it could be something that you learned, it could be some learning in terms of some challenge that you overcame. Please go ahead. There are so many opportunities in terms of many forums, many media where you could share your stories. That's one. And the second thing is, it's a request to especially young people, if you could spend more time in understanding issues, because most of us now get our news on social media, right? And which is not a perfect medium to actually get in depth. But you anyway come across news clips or links. So take the time out to actually go deeper into issues. If you come across something and if there's like 500 words about it, but try to find out more and more about it and kind of deepen your understanding as well as broadening your horizons. And that's very important to kind of overcome these challenges, because now our attention is fleeting, or we kind of getting more superficial in some of these issues. But if we really want to start solving problems in our communities or even at a larger level, we need to understand in depth. And that's would be my request to everybody. Yeah.
Fantastic. What beautiful advice. So we end with two key messages. So one is that everyone has a right to communicate, and secondly, please do try and understand in depth the problems that you care about. We all care about different things, but what is it that is actually causing that problem? Before we try to solve it, it's important that we do understand. And with that, we do close this session. Right after this session, in about 5 minutes' time, there is the closing session of the summit for 2020. So I encourage the audience who have joined to join us for the next session as well. But for the meanwhile, I thank Salim, Samad, and Mira for the wonderful time that you have given. And if there's one thing that we've taken away or learned from this session, it's that 45 minutes is clearly not enough to share the wonderful stories that we all have. So in the future, I hope that we can all get together again with a lot more time, with a lot more stories, and hopefully a lot more impact to the youth audiences who are joining us and will join us in the future as well. So in the meantime, thank you so much, Salim. Thank you so much, Mira. We'll be
Thank you so much. It was a
Good night.
wonderful session. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Mira.
Bye-bye.
for
Thank
having
you,
me.
sir. It was very
And
good to
for
hear
some-
you. Yeah.
This is, I feel like going to Bangalore to see your work.
Please do. And yeah, I'd like to